showed me what. Instead of asking why, start asking why not. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're lying in the sun. Bit by bit, the older that we get, the faster it tick, 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 ticks. Time flies. Whoa, whoa, time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun. Dennis Beck, Marshfield High School, 1975, provides our intro song. Dennis, thanks once again. Reunion Fest week begins tomorrow actually, as next Saturday night, June the 29th, we'll have Reunion Fest here at our campus on this facility. So I thought it'd be very appropriate this week to invite Marshfield's current superintendent, Mr. Mike Henry. And Mike,
thank you for having me.
welcome. Absolutely. We're so happy to have you today. Mike will go down as another piece of history to this campus and this school as we record history, and that's what we're trying to do, is document the history of Marshfield and Marshfield School and our community for future generations. And so we're happy to have you here as a part of that. Mike, what we do is really simple. We just basically learn a little more about you. We start at the beginning, and as one of our guests said one time, when did you come to America?
So I've got to tell this story just a little bit, but I probably had one of the easiest lives of anybody that I know. You know, I had just a great childhood growing up in Douglas County. I don't tell everybody that. That's not true, but Booger County raised.
Booger County.
That's right. Yeah. So my mom was a teacher there, and my dad was a personnel manager, HR manager at Emerson, the motor division, and then it transitioned to Copeland and then Emerson. And anyway, so he was there for a long time. So that's where our roots are, and that's where my wife was from. And got two older sisters, and we were just ingrained in our community and our church and sports and all of those things. So it was a good growing up.
You bet. Are your sisters still around?
Yeah. So I've got my oldest sister lives in Reed Spring. And then my next oldest sister lives in Lebanon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're pretty close then.
Yes.
And your folks are still?
Yep. They're still going 100 down in Douglas County, and still very involved in the church that I grew up in, and serving on various boards. My mom served on the school board there, and
She
library.
retired as a teacher now?
She's retired as a teacher. Yep. Maybe she retired. Boy, years get away from me. I want to say maybe 2008 is when she retired.
So Douglas County, Ava, Missouri, you graduated, and I apologize because I think on the promotion that I put on Facebook, I said that you graduated in '94, and that was just simply me not paying attention to what you had told me after I'd asked you. But it's 97.
I don't need any additional years. It's 97.
Well, I understand that, but it's actually kind of hard to believe you're that young. But you've certainly accomplished much in your young 40-some years, I guess it would be, right?
Yes.
So what was it like growing up in Ava in the 90s, the 80s and 90s? Obviously, Ava's a little smaller than Marshfield. What did you guys do? What did you do? Did you play ball? I'm sure you were involved in a lot of things.
So we were. So basketball was my thing growing up. I tell kids today, that I was probably my biggest fan. Thought I was a lot better than what I was, but but it still played an important role, and that's one of the reasons that I value those extracurriculars so much, is because it becomes so important to the school world. Getting a little bit into the professional side, though, I guess, but
it really gives kids a reason to work towards something, doesn't it? And reach and accomplish a goal.
It does, and it's you have goals bigger than yourself in that setting, whether it's basketball or band or whatever that extra thing is that you're passionate about. It makes it just ties some importance to the school side of things. So I was very involved with that. Picked up golf later in my school career. As far as the family, I talked about our church. We didn't travel when I was a kid. My folks bought a pontoon boat, and so we spent our summers at Bull Shoals Lake. We went to Pontiac every summer or every Saturday, and that was very That was very important.
Those
to
are
the
great memories, I'm
Oh
sure.
my
Yeah.
goodness,
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
We actually went down there last weekend for Father's Day,
Yeah.
and it was very it was very enjoyable just to think about all of those.
Reminiscing.
Yes, yes, all of those memories. And my wife Brooke, she had a very similar growing up, and we were Pontiac people, and they were Theodosia people, but spending time on Bull Shoals Lake was important for us.
So you actually have known Brooke all of your school lives, you might say. I mean,
So we started dating in high school. We were actually talking about this last
mhm.
weekend too. Her family, her grandparents owned the Dairy Queen in Ava, and so we laugh about how many times we interacted as we were little kids that we didn't know. But yes, we've known each other a long time. Been together since my junior year of high school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's good.
Well, gosh, just having memories of going to the Dairy Queen, let alone the fact that she was there, would be
Right.
would be something for sure as a kid. Um, so you graduated from high school and then went on to college, and I know you've got great education and has served you well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So graduated 97, and I went to at the time it was SMS. I still have trouble calling it MSU, but
Right.
not knowing for sure what I wanted to do. Started off with a major of recreation, which my dad made a lot of fun of me to say that I was majoring and having a good time.
Well, that's not all bad. That's not all bad.
I
You
didn't
can
see
get
it.
paid for it.
That's right. That's right. But as I got just a little bit into in my coursework, I just kept coming back to the education side, and I'd been involved in various coaching opportunities, and I just loved it. I loved pouring back into something that I saw value in, and I saw a difference being made, hopefully a positive one.
Hmm.
And so declared an education major, uh, much to the chagrin of my mother, who is also in education, but um, it's been great. So through that process, I got to coach at Nixa while I was still in college, volleyball actually, and then coming out of college, my first teaching job was in Seymour. So
Oh,
so our
wow.
neighbor to the south.
Yeah. So you can pretty much live at home or be
That's right.
where you grew up.
Yep.
That's great.
So got to teach fifth through eighth grade. Middle school math is what I taught there for the most part, and coached basketball and cross country there. So
It seems like, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is just anecdotal, but I mean, it seems like the athletes, the ones that, if they don't become a coach, they either teach math or science. It seems like that's their thing, It's kind of interesting
It
because
is
you hear a lot of,
interesting.
Al Thomas was a math teacher,
Yeah.
and went on and was a great athlete. And I mean, the athletics, then math, and then administration.
That-
Seems like
that is an
common,
interesting thing.
yeah,
You're right. I don't
it's
know
interesting.
what the
Yeah.
what the numbers share there, but I can sure point to a lot of people
Yeah,
that have been in
yeah.
that spot.
I think it's worth noting as well, and you and I have talked about this, but I think the general public would certainly appreciate this too. Our new director of DESE,
Yes.
Senator Esslinger, Carla Esslinger, who's I guess that's Ozark County native,
Yep.
which is just a hop, skip, and a jump south of your old stomping ground. But she spent a lot of time in Ava.
Yes.
And of course, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? I think to have that personal connection with the director of DESE is going to be very helpful going forward, especially for rural Missouri.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge win for public education in Missouri. But the background there, from my perspective, Carla spent time at Ludi and then spent time at Gainesville Elementary as principal, where I also got to serve following her. But she came to Ava as assistant superintendent with Maynard Wallace, who's also a significant,
kind of a legend.
That's right, absolutely is. And then she and Dave raised her kids. They both finished there at Ava.
Oh, really?
And yep,
Okay. Didn't
yep,
really
just
realize that.
just great, great people. Brooke actually got to babysit Carla's kids, and she'd run them home after school while Carla was working. And then Carla went to West Plains as she finished out her career, and we've just stayed in contact. So she worked with Desi for a while, and she worked nationally, and then came back in the political stage. And what I appreciate about that is knowing, I know that she understands what the school side looks like. And so having somebody there that recognizes our values in Southwest Missouri, having that common sense approach, recognizing that there's always things to improve.
That's right.
And so we always want to be getting better, but taking an approach of how do we get from where we are to where we want to be in a reasonable manner that represents our area well.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Carla's going to do that.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
And I got well acquainted with her in her run for Senate. Certainly, she and Senator Cunningham were good friends, and I was able to help her a little bit on her campaign. And we knew that she was the right person to represent rural Missouri, and it's just going to be really helpful to have her in that position. I think accomplishments are something that's important too, and I know. Well, let's talk a little bit first about your career. Then you started out teaching,
Sure.
and then you came to Marshfield, and let's talk about that.
So, educationally, so math teacher, and then I started my administration career in Gainesville, and was elementary principal there, and so that was preschool through 6th grade, and it was the perfect starting point for me. The community is wonderful. The school has very high standards, and they're very welcoming. So they're very kind in helping a new administrator start out. I think I was 27 when I started there.
That's pretty young to be administrator.
It was probably for me, but it was just a great experience. Bill Looney, I don't know if you know any of the Looney family, but a very rich education background there. Bill spent 31 years at Gainesville, and so he was a great mentor for me. And then 2 of my very best friends were there too, and that made it just really fun. Our whole time that we were married, we lived in Ava, and so we were always commuting to Seymour or to Gainesville. Brooke taught at Seymour as well. And anyway, as our oldest son Drew started school, and we were both going different ways to work, we thought maybe we needed to look at Ava. And at that time, the superintendent came to me and asked me to consider coming as the middle school principal, and so I did, and that was a great experience. Ava Middle School, it was 5th through 8th grade, and was just really positive. It had some great kids, and they were very kind to me as well. 2 years there, the board asked me to move into an assistant superintendent role, and that's a little bit different than here because there was just one, and so it was just basically whatever I'm told to do is what we do. And so I served there for 3 years.
Probably drove the bus if you were short bus driver.
We did whatever we needed to do to get through.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, you get into Southwest Missouri and it's different.
It is.
It's different than other places, and everyone's willing to help out. But in December of 2016, I felt a strong calling for a job opening here. And it was a little bit unusual because I didn't really have a Marshfield connection. Once I got here, I realized there were some, but felt strongly that I needed to look at this, and that process just kept progressing. And at the time, my wife was digging her heels in a little bit and didn't think that's what we were supposed to do because we just built what we said was our forever house.
Oh, really?
Yes. And this going through that process, it just felt like it was the right thing to do, and I got offered a job here in February of 2017, and I accepted that, and we made the decision as a family. It's close enough that I could have commuted, but just knowing what administration looks like and knowing what buy-in from a community looks like, we decided that we wanted to all be together. And anyway, so we didn't get our house sold in Ava, but we just went ahead and moved, and we rented a house here in town in Briarwood. And in fact, we started coming to church here that spring. Our Brooke and I's youth pastor was Brian Letzinger. I don't know if you knew Brian or not, but
Brian's a great guy.
Oh my goodness. And so coming here, we were able to reconnect with Brian. He married us, and then once we got here, we got very connected with Jason Roast, of course, it being in the Nazarene Church, and Sonny was from Mansfield, and so our families were a little bit connected from church there. That's where she grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the best man in my wedding was Jeremy Lofton.
Yes.
So he was ingrained in Marshfield,
Yeah.
and then Karen Johnson, a retired teacher here in Marshfield, is my great aunt, is a half sister of my granny.
I just saw Carrie's post. But her Bob passed away, and made the comment that when I introduced you as being our guest,
Yes.
you made a comment that you were Karen's nephew or great nephew, and I did not know that.
So
Karen was a great lady. I knew her really well, and of course Bob again just passed this past week.
Yeah, I didn't get to know them. So my granny's dad, granny's mother passed away, and so he kind of had a separate family, and so I didn't get very connected.
Yeah.
To them. But as I came, it was really neat for me because I had this in-town cheerleader. That was
retired teacher.
Yes,
too. I mean,
yes, it was very encouraging and
retired teachers are pretty important.
Yes,
support in a small family.
absolutely
I'm sure
they
you
are.
figured out.
They know things and have so many connections. But that was really neat for me. And so the first several years here, I would just get so many encouraging words from Karen. She would text and give me nice messages and support.
That's
so
cool.
that was fun.
Yeah.
But that was kind of my journey on the administration side to
But
Marshfield.
you came in as a assistant superintendent, right?
Yes.
And was Dave Stewart the superintendent?
So Dave was here and had followed Alan Thomas.
Sure.
And so what I told people when I came is if in my time I can be half as effective or impactful as Alan Thomas was, then I'll consider myself wildly successful. So, in my mind, Mr. Thomas set that precedent of just taking care of people, making sure that we're serving our community well through our school and taking care of people. And so I had gotten to know him a few years before. He may not remember that. He probably does. He remembers every person he meets. But anyway, I got to see that, and so I knew what Marshfield stood for from his perspective. And so Dave was great to work with. We were able to pass a bond and levy issue that first year that we were here, and it was so encouraging to see the support from the school. So we did that for two pieces. We did it for roofs and HVAC units, so we'd gotten a little bit behind on some of our general maintenance at Marshfield, and then we also did it for teacher pay. And so we were able to pass that, and we were as transparent as we could be with that process for what the money was for, and we were able to do that timely, and I think people appreciated that, and then we've been able to do it a couple times since.
Did you extend the tax, or did you actually raise the levy a little bit?
So we raised it.
I couldn't remember. There's been some different ones along the way. It wasn't extreme amount, anything like some have been in the past or tried to do.
No.
Well, I know. Just my observation as a conservative serving in the legislature, where as a Republican, you just don't like any kind of tax increase. You don't like taxes to start with,
right?
But there's times that you have to do that, and certainly those that make sense, that are well thought, that produce the most value for the money. All those things factor in, and sometimes they aren't always proposed that way. We've had some in the past that maybe didn't fly because they weren't presented the way that the patrons wanted them to. I could think back when we tried to pass a jail tax, and years ago it failed 3 times. Well, we finally got one, but it's because they did a better job of presenting where it would go, how much, the whole plan.
Yeah.
And I think in those early times they didn't do that. And so you have to really research the whole thing. One time they wanted to blow up Eiler Field and build a building there and build a new things that, at the time during the recession didn't make a lot of sense.
Sure. Our approach to that, my thinking is, none of this is my money,
That's right.
So when we got that first one passed and we started thinking, okay, we are seeing some growth in Marshfield. What's a long range plan? We just started asking everybody, and then we got the list of the 10 or 11 biggest things, and then, okay, this is what you guys said are important, and so that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And it's made it a lot easier. It doesn't feel like it's something to sell.
Right.
This is what you guys thought was
Yeah.
important, so this is what it costs, and
Yeah.
would you like to do it? And so we just keep plugging along. It's been very rewarding for me. So in 21, when we finished that long range plan, it was 10 years, and after this year, we will have completed
Is that right?
that 10-year plan. Yes, on the physical improvements, without seeing an increase to
And you've
taxes.
done it in 3-4 years?
4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of that.
And I know you're, I guess, under the Stewart Henry regime. You got the preschool,
Yes.
which is a huge project, and if I'm not mistaken, that was one where you could extend the levy.
Yep.
Yeah. So it didn't cost the taxpayer any more now, and I think that was important, especially that building. Replaced a bunch of old trailers, and
That's right.
and it's providing a service, an additional service, and more than what you were able to do before,
Yes.
with adding more opportunities for parents for their young children and things like that. So there's lots of things that do make sense that still cost, but you do it in the conservative manner.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
want to be very fiscally responsible, and trying to make sure that as the lead budget person for the district, that we are saving for a rainy day, but not being a bank,
Right,
and making sure
right,
that resources
right.
are going to our students and
Absolutely.
our staff.
I was a county commissioner during the beginning of the recession, and I'm telling you, it was a whole nother world back then. It was
Yes.
really, really difficult. And then after 2 years, went into the legislature, and we were looking at truly, truly trying to figure out how we were going to balance the state's budget. The budget was about 30 billion then. It's 50 billion now. That's been in 12 years.
That's
So
unbelievable.
it is unbelievable, but I'm just saying that's how tough things were during that recession. And you were looking at everything, and of course, it's not easy. And the schools were dealing with the same situation. But fortunately, we've overcome that. And then, of course, about the time you got things rolling really good, something else hit, right?
Yes.
And so you got here just as the pandemic began, didn't you?
Well, so it came in the fall of 17,
Okay.
and the pandemic started March of 20.
Okay.
But what was really nice about that, looking back, I wouldn't have said it was nice at the time, but looking back, having been able to establish some relationships and build some relationship with an expectation with our community and staff, I think it helped people feel comfortable that we were going to work to take care of people during that time, and deal with that in a reasonable manner. I do not want to live through that again, but professionally, I'm as proud of that time as probably anything in my
man,
career.
it was tough, yeah.
It was really
yeah.
hard. And when you watch the news, even around the state, but certainly around the country, and being able to point to, we got our students back as soon as we were allowed.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't perfect, and we certainly made some mistakes, but overall, I feel like people were appreciative of as much normalcy as we were allowed to have.
I think so too.
So,
I think so too. The leadership, it's undeniable, was very astute in staying focused on what they should be, and that was the kids.
Yes.
It was all about the kids, and so glad that's behind us. And again, you were part of that leadership at that time. Well, I guess you did take over then. What year?
Yeah, so took over in 21.
Yeah, which was right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Mr. Stewart is who wore the brunt of that. I jokingly say that as an administrator, I feel like sometimes I'm aging in dog years. But truly for him, that was something that was unprecedented and was hard.
Yeah,
hard.
it had to be.
And I know he wore that.
Yeah. I don't know if you've thought about this, but I was thinking as I was kind of preparing for this interview, the responsibility that a school superintendent has would be unmatched by anyone in a community if you really think about it. I mean, what do you got? 3,500 kids? 3,000?
Yeah, 3,100.
3,100 children are dropped off or picked up on a bus, or their parents are putting them on a bus or dropping them off and say, we'll see you in 8 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. And truly the responsibility to keep those kids safe is on your shoulders.
Yes.
Because if anything goes wrong, you're the ultimate, the buck stops with you.
Yeah.
And this is not just for a summer camp or not just for a Bible school or Sunday school on a Sunday morning. This is 100 and how many days out of the year?
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Think about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've really thought about it, but
Yes.
it's a huge, huge responsibility. And then with that, trying to keep some kind of sanity and order with all of the teachers and all of their personalities and all the fact that they've got stuff coming at them all the time from DESE or from the school board or whoever it is, and trying to keep them, corralled and you've got some great teachers, wonderful teachers. As a matter of fact, we're so proud of Marshfield School in general, and it's mainly because of the teachers.
Sure.
But still, you just, and then you've got the parents.
Yes.
Then you got the parents, and then you still got the kids, because you got some kids that they maybe weren't quite raised like some. So it's just a huge responsibility, and I admire that, and I'm not patronizing you, but I think people should realize what kind of a job you have and how tough it can be compared to, some of us that pretty much don't have that kind of responsibility.
So there are days, Lyndall, where it can feel heavy,
I'm sure.
Trying to manage a situation where a staff and a parent both believe that they're right and trying to work through those things.
Yeah.
The two things that I would say is, number one, everybody's world is their world. And so whether it's just 5 people or whether it's 4,000, if something's going wrong in that, it's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And so some of that perspective for me is important. Is sometimes when I feel it's a little bit heavy, I try to keep that perspective that everybody's dealing with something.
Yeah.
And so I try to remember that. And then the other thing that's so valuable that people need to remember in Marshfield is it's not like this everywhere.
I know.
So when you talk about our school board, when you talk about our parents, when you talk about our staff, like, people are wonderful here.
Yeah.
And we had a meeting this week at the health unit, and I'm just sitting there listening. Whether it's the county or the city, everybody wants the other to be successful. Mm-hmm. And I've been part of great communities everywhere I've been, but that is unique to Marshfield.
Yes.
When we see the city board of aldermen come up with something that's wonderful, the school cheers for them.
Right.
And the same is reciprocated. The county, everybody, police and sheriff, and everybody wants success because we all see that as good for Marshfield. And I think it's encouraging when I go to various meetings or events in other places, people always talk about, I'm hearing good things about Marshfield. And I hope that includes the school, but it's not exclusively the school.
No, but it does include the school, I can tell you that. And my perspective on all of that, obviously, my eyes were open after spending 12 years in Jeff City. Not every community has that.
Right.
I mean, and I'll be quite frank with you, Mike, there are even legislators and there are people that absolutely despise the public school system.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily their particular school, but maybe they do despise their school or certain people in the school or whatever. And it's really sad.
Yeah.
It's really sad, but there's a reason for that. And so, not placing blame, but there's a reason. You got to get to the bottom of the reason.
That's
whether
right.
It's the board or whether it's the administration or whether it's the, DESE or what's coming down from Washington, D.C. And we all know that there are issues there.
Right.
I mean, we know that.
Yes.
And you're the ones that have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But even with that, some of you are able to do it. And some of you are able to balance that discussion and being able to take the good and leave the bad. And so obviously Marshfield's doing it right, or they seem to have been doing it right in recent years. And so the other thing that I want to mention too, and again, not trying to patronize you, but I think it's worth, I'm a believer in celebrating your successes.
Yes. I appreciate that.
You definitely want to deal with the with the negatives and the faults, and we got to fix those. But you also, at the same time, should celebrate successes. You appear to have a board that is pretty cohesive. We've not always had that.
Yeah.
We've had boards that would publicly argue with each other and fight with each other and have a total different perception philosophically, you know, of what public education should be for the kids. And it seems like your board is pretty cohesive. That's got to be a huge asset.
It's a big deal to have a school board who is there to make the school better without agendas. And so I hope that they would say the same thing about their administrators, because we're all working together to serve our community. And so if you can get yourself out of a mindset of what I want to do, it changes it all. And I think that goes way beyond school. It's just leadership.
Culture.
Yeah. But that's our school board. You know, we don't agree on everything. And that's okay.
Yeah.
We're not supposed
None
to.
of us do.
But the thing that we say a lot at Marshfield is, I want you to know my heart. And then we can talk through anything. Because if you know that I'm not a bad person, or I'm not trying to manipulate or do anything poorly, then you can have a discussion and disagree, and that be okay. But all of our school board members value education. They believe in Marshfield, and they recognize the good things that we're doing and want us to get better. It's the same thing all of us want. And so it has really been, it's just been a blessing for me to be in that spot.
Yeah. That's great. Well, keep it up.
Well,
keep it up.
Thank you.
And you'll definitely be successful. The culture of our community, I mentioned that word a minute ago. Culture is important. Culture, in my opinion, trumps strategy. And it's so important that you carry on with the culture and the things that have got. The reason we all love Marshfield, there's certain assets, attributes there that have to be carried on.
Yes.
And you can't change in the name of progress because this is 2024. We don't do things like we did in 1974. You know, they're getting ready to have their 50th reunion here on the field next Saturday night, and that's true. You know, the world changes. But there's some things about tradition, some things about the culture that you have to keep and carry on.
Yes.
And don't ever forget that. Now, it's up to you to figure that out. There'll be plenty of people to help you, but I mean, that's important.
One of the things that I would point to there, and unfortunately he's just got a handful of days left, but Jeff Curley says this very well. Love on kids. And so as a school, we have what we call our non-negotiables that won't change. And taking care of kids is center in that. All the other things, we'll talk about how instruction looks or what preparing kids for a successful future looks like, but making sure that kids and families are taken care of.
That's right.
It doesn't change.
And there's a common denominator too, that, you know, there's no question that faith plays a big part. Your faith and the faith of those that believe in you and in all of the administrators. I mean, biblical principles have been enforced since the beginning of civilization almost.
Yes.
And we need to remember that. And there's a lot of pressure in today's times to want to rewrite the book when it comes to some of those kind of things. But I think it's important that we remember who brought us to the dance. And you know, there's obviously just this week the 10 Commandments were voted upon in Louisiana to be posted on the school walls, and there would be some that wouldn't agree with that. But we won't get into that discussion. But I can tell you that the principles of the 10 Commandments, how can anyone deny that they're not good principles to live by?
Sure. So what I would say to that is, you know, when in my order of importance, it's faith, family, work, and work is very high. So those other two are extremely high. I want my job to be a ministry for me, but what that looks like in a school setting versus on the street is different. But treating people well is something that I can, and I fail sometimes, but hopefully it's something that I can do every day, and walk out my faith without, not without, just doing that differently than what some would in their
And you
professions.
shouldn't have to make excuses for it.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be
Yeah.
comfortable with that. You were recognized a year or two ago or recently for being, I think it was one of 8 administrators or superintendents that I guess you might say sort of a rising star in our state. Tell us about that. And I know you're humble, but tell us what that was about.
So what I say is that just must have been a shallow pool.
No.
MASA, Missouri Association of School Administrators, is kind of our go-to organization in Missouri for especially superintendents. And so I'm trying to remember, maybe after my first year as superintendent, I did get recognized for that. I was very honored to receive that. You know, I don't know for sure
What were the principles that they sort of awarded that upon?
I can't remember. So it's a superintendent in their first 3 years who is making, you know, positive changes or improvements in their school or something along those lines. And you know, it isn't something I'm super comfortable with, but it was very nice to be recognized. And there are a lot of nights that you just worry and stew about stuff, and so it was just very kind.
A little bit of a payback.
Yes.
Well, and there's 540 some districts in the state. 540 some.
So.
And you were one of 8.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, and you're not going to admit it. That's fine, but I can say it.
It was
nice.
A big deal.
It was a big deal.
Since 2021, I may be getting my numbers off here, but this August, since 2021, there will be about 420-ish new superintendents in their role.
What? Really?
Yeah. Not all of those are new to the position, but they're changing.
Just changing buildings.
Over 100 a year the last 4 years.
Really?
And so it has become a little bit of a lightning rod position for whatever reason. And it's wearing people out.
Yeah.
But thinking about that, it makes some of the hard things like, hey, maybe things are going well, you know?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting to look since the reorganization of schools in we'll just say 1960. That may not have been exact time, but when they did away with the county superintendent and began the school board being in control and hiring the superintendent, you know, Mr. Barr, of course, long-term superintendent, a legend, just set the standard in Marshfield, certainly. But you know, there's only been like 80 of you guys. I mean,
that's right.
That's not very many. And actually, if you take Mr. Barr at 30 years or whatever, I think he's 25 years as superintendent. He'd been the principal a few years, and then you had, you know, Dr. Howard and then Dr. Dana and Mike Wutke. I mean, they all were here like 10 years each.
Yeah.
And then in the last few years, you know, Mr. Mayo, Al, David, and you, of course, you're going to be here a long time. We know that. And maybe those guys were getting toward the end of their career. You know, it was time to retire. But the tenure's not there like it used to be. You know, when you go from a guy that was there 25 years, and then you had a group that at 10 apiece, and then now you're down to we're going to hold you to be in here for a while.
So the average lifespan for a superintendent in a district is less than 3 years now.
Yeah, see that?
So
that's crazy.
But when I came, what I told people, and other than God absolutely telling me something else, my plan is I'll retire or be fired from Marshfield. That's my plan.
Well,
so hopefully it's retire.
That's good news for us. However, on the other hand, if you've got an opportunity that's better for you and your family and your livelihood, no one should ever stand in the way.
Yeah.
And I'm a believer in that. And,
yeah.
But that's good news for us to hear
at
this point. So what about the future? You know, I don't know if you realize this, but we're like already 3/4 of the way through this. So that's how fast it goes when it
In our top.
yeah,
Okay.
when it's just a conversation. So it goes by really fast. But I want to talk about the future.
Yeah.
And again, you've got 3,300 students, 3,100 students, and I'm going to guess that 25 years ago you had 2,000 students. I don't know.
Yeah.
But based on the population of our community and northern Webster County and even Webster County. So 20 years from now, year's 2044. And you know how fast 20 years will go by. What do you see with Marshfield School? Do you see a sort of similar system, infrastructure? Do you see big changes? I know we went to the 4-day school week, and that seems to be successful. I know there's a little pushback statewide, and I'm sure aware of that.
Yeah.
But in general, it seems to be maybe successful.
Yeah.
So what do you see in 20 years?
So what I would say to 20 years is when you think about the changes that have taken place in the last 10, I don't think we can look out 20 years because there's so many unanticipated changes that are going to occur. It'll throw you off. So what I would say is let's talk about 5 first. Let's talk about 10. In Marshfield, I want to talk about a few things, and I'm going to talk about the 4-day week.
Yeah.
So this last year we started Family J Night.
Mm-hmm.
That's outside of the school day, but that's a resource for parents. So I can remember bringing our oldest home from the hospital and thinking, they didn't send anybody else with us. What are we supposed to do? There's no instruction book.
Mom,
right? What's happening? And so I think it's valuable for people to have resources, because sometimes being a single parent, it's lonely and it's hard. And I don't ever want our parents to look at the school as this us versus them mentality. And if a parent is going through and they're struggling with whatever, because they've not experienced that before, we just don't know. I don't know. I've got 4 kids. I wanted to bring people together for those resources. And so I think that's going to continue to be important. One of the reasons that that's important is because I bragged about Marshfield, but not every community is like this. And so we brought those resources together, whether that's family services or a church or a food bank. The city has so many options to get kids involved, get active, but it also brings us together in small groups of like-minded people. Hey, I've got a 4-year-old and so do you. How do you do fill in the blank? And so I think that resource is going to continue to be important, because not all of our families experienced the childhood I did. Yeah. And I think that will be very valuable for us, and we're going to continue that. I also think it's going to be important for us to continue growing our early childhood center and that preschool opportunity. We are seeing kindergarten age students coming with less exposure to books, to letters, to colors, to following directions, to turn taking. And I'm not saying that critically. I'm just saying that's just the truth.
Yeah.
So growing that is going to be important. Our Parents as Teachers program helps with that significantly. But I also want to make sure that our kids, so our goal is to prepare each student for successful futures, what we say every meeting, so that we're keeping our focus on that, but making sure that they have real world experience. So we value our traditional classroom as well, but if we don't understand the application, then we're losing a little bit. And that the job market and the workforce is changing so rapidly. I can't remember the statistics that they say, but I'm going to make this up, but 20% of the jobs that are going to exist when our kindergartners graduate don't exist now, or
amazing?
Yeah,
that's great.
And so just making sure that they are prepared for that. Right now we're battling screen time.
Yeah.
And I can see the value of technology, but I also see the shortcomings and the problems that it's causing, the struggles with being able to talk to somebody and work through problems. And I think it's adding to anxiety and worry and fear and comparison and self-worth and all of those things. And so I think we're going to see a world where we're trying to decrease that exposure at school.
But you know, I've got a thought on that, because I'm obviously a product of pre-IT, right? Graduate 1977. There wasn't a computer in Marshfield School, not one. I think my dad, who was a banker, they had a big old machine in the bank that was the only one in town, probably. Maybe Show Me Power had one. But you know, we talk about that screen time issue. But here's the deal. Even in the job that I have, part-time at Roast Ready Mix as the safety director, and then when you couple that with all the stuff that I have to do, whether I'm dealing with Social Security or if I'm dealing with whatever it is, if I want to go to order something from Amazon, whatever, I'm on that computer screen more today than I've ever been in my life, even when I was working full-time for the state. I mean, you go to your office and you're behind the screen. Yeah. Everything is done from there. You can't pick up the phone and call somebody because they want you to use the computer. You got to go online to do it.
Right.
Well, society's doing this to themselves.
Sure.
We blame, I don't know if we blame parents for allowing our kids to be on the screen playing games or something like that, but that's really not the issue. The issue is we're forced to use the screen for everything we do.
Yeah.
Everything we do, and good or bad. So we sort of contradict ourselves, and maybe we ought to be, maybe out here in the corporate world or in society in general, we ought to be looking at ways to communicate again by phone or.
Yes. Or in person.
Somehow. Yeah, right. What's wrong with in person? You know?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's interesting.
I think that there are tools and technology that are so valuable, but there are also pieces, especially as it relates to kids and social media, that has negative connotations, and just being able to work through that and make sure that we are helping our students be prepared for that is going to be important too.
Monitoring.
Yes.
Guidance.
Yes.
And I see that in your, for lack of a better word, business.
Yeah.
It seems like classroom time is not, it's important, but it's not quite as important as it used to be, because you've got kids now that are graduating that maybe weren't very good classroom students, but they're brilliant.
Yes.
And they're doing it on their own. They're doing it with YouTube. They're doing it with all the technology that's at their disposal. But there still needs to be some guidance. There needs to be somebody giving them direction, monitoring, whether it's parents or teachers or whoever. So that has to make your role change, your teachers' roles change.
Absolutely. Recognizing that that's part of what we're doing is important. But when I think back to Mrs. Straight was one of the most impactful teachers to me. Now, if you said, tell me the 3 things she taught you, I can't remember the tests, but here's what I know. Her expectations were high, and she cared about me.
Yeah.
And those characteristics are still true for a great
basic
teacher.
Human principles.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. Now, she made my paper writing much easier in college, because she used a whole lot of red pen on my papers every week or every assignment.
Yeah.
But I think those are the things that as educators we have to remember, that it's so much more than just what our curriculum is or the technology we're using. It's the relationship piece.
And maybe my generation and older got that at home, or got it at church, or got it. More people got it there than they maybe are able to today.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, we have, as it relates to technology, I didn't experience that as a kid because it wasn't there.
Right.
And so it's hard to know how to teach that to mine.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't around.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, our kids are teaching us technology.
That's right. It's like, what do I do with this?
Yeah. We're rolling right along. We got 10 minutes left because we started a little bit late. It's 10:30, but I'm going to add one more little anecdote to that conversation.
Okay.
Does everybody see these blue book manuals here? The Missouri State manuals, right? These are the newer ones, and these are the old ones down here. I've got some all the way back to the 1890s. Fortunate to be able to get some. That's kind of my collection that I'm just enjoy. When I came into the Missouri House in 2011, they had voted the year prior to not produce those manuals anymore. Okay, all online. Well, of course, I've already got a collection, and a lot of these were done when Roy Blunt was Secretary of State. Roy Blunt, Steve Aarons, a Marshfield native, he was the publisher. And it's just a novelty, but it was a neat thing. And I love to pick one up now and go back through and look and see who was the state rep for Webster County in 1934. Well, it was Bob Fyan, Martha Fogelsong and Jane Henson's father. He was our state rep. And to read those kinds of things, I'm a history guy, right? So I introduced a bill, and this was during the recession. The recession had hit. There was no money, and that's why they had voted to do away with the manual. Mm-hmm. But what they were doing is they were producing those and giving the state senators like 100 and the state reps 100 to just give away to their constituents. It cost a lot of money. And so I introduced a bill, and I got the Missouri Press to back me on it because they didn't want to see them go away either, to bring back the Blue Book, right? By golly, we got it through. But instead of costing the state $5 million or something, it was going to cost the state maybe $1 million, but then you would buy the book, and they would get reimbursed. So it didn't really end up costing the state that much money, a little obviously. Right. But it was keeping a piece of history on the shelf that we can go back to and our grandchildren can go back to. Right. And so there was 1 year missing. I got that 1 year, I think it's the 2011-12 year was the one that's missing because they missed it. And so anyway, that's my one little piece of history that I enjoy being a part of. But there's a great example. Yes. We as a society continue, are we not going to need libraries someday? Right. Think about it. And if you go into your school library, it doesn't look near like what it did when I was in school or you were in school. Yeah. And just having those other resources electronically is just new. It's not what I'm used to. But that's still screen time. Yes, that's right. That's right. I agree with that. Well, Mike, what about kind of a follow-up to the future thing? Yeah. Do you see more buildings? So that's a great question. So right now, our enrollment is very flat since COVID. So we were seeing a little bit of growth, and during that long-range planning, we did we studied with a demographer. At that time, he said it was more likely to see a slight decrease in Marshfield than increase. And so we're pretty flat. And so when you look at our buildings, so right now we have a safe room at the East Campus going up. We have an expansion in the ag, and then we have the field house that will house wrestling and then give some space to baseball and softball. It'll be a large metal building, but all of those are not, it's not requiring new staff. Yeah. And so we're just trying to take care of some needs without new classroom space that we can't necessarily fill. Right now, I would say, as we see these new housing developments coming in, I think we need to be preparing for that. Right. And so keeping that in mind, I think, is important without getting so far in front of ourselves that we're being irresponsible. Because right now, I would say we are right on the edge of seeing some significant growth. Once that happens, we need to be prepared for that. Doesn't that show in your graduating classes as well? I mean, they've really not grown, have they? I know, even going back to my class, which I was the tail end of the baby boomers. We had 148 in our senior class in 1977. I mean, and you're just a little north of 200 now, right? Yeah. And when you look at the population of Marshfield or Webster County, it's doubled. Webster County's doubled since 1990. Right. The population in 1990 was like 19 or 20,000 people roughly. It's 41,000 now. So, and all that growth isn't on the south side. Certainly Rogersville has a lot of growth. Yes. But it's not Seymour. It's not Fordham particularly. Yeah. It's Marshfield to go from 3,500 people in 1970 to 75, or probably close to 8,000 now.
Yeah.
Why are we not getting the young families with kids? That's the question.
So there's two pieces to this, I think. One, right now, we have people call us, not every day, but I bet every other week, hey, we were wanting to come to Marshfield School. Do you know of any houses?
No place to live.
No place to
That's exactly
live.
right.
But there's also a second piece to this, and that's homeschool.
Yeah.
And so homeschool / virtual, so
Yeah.
people can get a type of education different than just the regular school that wasn't always an option. And some of those on the homeschool side, some of them are doing extremely well, and some of them aren't serving our kids.
Right.
But the number of homeschool families is different than what it's been.
Yeah, it has grown for sure.
Yeah, and that's
you
not
don't
just in Marshfield.
you don't get to count in that 3,100. You're not counting those.
No.
Although as a district, you still get to, in some ways, count those kids, don't you?
Hmm.
You don't.
Nope.
Okay.
So the only place they would be included in anything is as the state is looking at socioeconomic numbers.
Yeah.
So they would be considered in that. But as far as our enrollment, they're
So
not part of
so
the
what's
school.
the argument then by the public schools against an open enrollment situation or a stronger charter situation? It's not that it takes the students out of their jurisdiction. It's more just the funding that would go there that might not come to the public schools.
Yeah, so there's two pieces to that. So trying to figure out, okay, am I gaining, am I losing? So if and some of those structures are in place, but what if I'm next to Springfield and 500 kids want to come to my school district? Right. How do I handle that? Yeah. But the other part is, okay, let's say those come. Let's say half of Niagara comes here in an open enrollment setting. Well, their state dollars come with them, but as a taxpayer, where's that dollars go? Where do those dollars go? Mm-hmm. Or what happens then when they take the spot of one of our resident kids?
Yeah.
And it starts to bring up some other questions.
But you would have to agree that the Niagara situation is not really the problem, because those kids, I mean, they're almost like family. They're our neighbors. They're the they're the stepchildren or the cousins that that going to come and live with you because they don't have a good place to live. I mean, to me, it would make sense someday if Niagara wanted to, if the residents decided to somehow consolidate or incorporate with Marshfield, or at least give those students an opportunity to have more opportunities for education. I'm not going to say better education.
Yeah.
But I can't see where we could stand in the way if that would be the case.
Yeah.
But your Springfield example would be a great example. I certainly understand that. These kids want to come to a more rural, good, solid rural district and get out of the city.
Yeah. And that's where you get into the biggest questions. And then does it change year to year? Is there a kid going somewhere different every year based on whatever issue that pops up?
Just the kind of the unknown, the unforeseen, not having all the answers.
My experience in a lot of those things, when you're talking about a major change, is fear of what might happen tends to consume people. Rather than trying to work through the solutions, people throw out these whatabouts out that may or may not happen anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're far enough removed from most of those issues that it would not occur here anyway. But it would. Certainly districts up near St. Louis or Kansas City, the Lee Summits, those districts that are probably a little more rural, but not totally rural.
Right.
Would see those repercussions, or have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
More before we would, but the issue's not going to go away for a while. It's still going to be out there.
Sure,
it's going to always be out there, and we seem to be working more toward that as we go, small bites at a time.
I am not necessarily opposed to it. The thing that makes me a little uneasy is if we're competing for kids, are schools competing against one another with dollars or marketing for their school rather than just pouring into the kids that are.
If Rogersville's got a fantastic basketball program and you've got a fantastic basketball star here, that
Yes.
would they compete to get him to come over there?
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Right. That's right.
Well, I think our time's about up. Our producer, Logan Fraker, is back. That's always a sign. Mike, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you coming. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to add before we...
I just appreciate the opportunity to come visit with you. Anytime we get to talk, it's enjoyable. I enjoy hearing about the history of Marshfield, and of course you're full of that information, and it's good to hear. I'm just thankful to be part of this. So thank you for letting me.
Well, we're honored. Before we started the podcast, I showed Mike around a little bit here at the campus and gave him a little bit of a history lesson. But I'm always willing to do that. Love to do that. It's one of my real loves is history. I wasn't a real big math guy. I definitely wasn't a science guy, but I always loved history.
Yes.
And so I can take a little bit of credit for that. But I do want to remind folks, again, Reunion Fest this next Saturday night. Anyone's invited. Any adult's invited. We don't necessarily do it for the children, this particular event. We do a lot here on the campus for the children every day. But that event's for adults to come, reminisce. You don't have to be a graduate. Matter of fact, we love for friends and family of graduates that weren't graduates to come because it's a great way to mingle and socialize and have good fellowship amongst each other. We've got 4 bands that all have MHS alumni in the bands, and they're all great performers. You'll enjoy coming and sitting and relaxing and listening. There'll be food trucks here. It's just a great time. The classes of, I know 84 and 74 are both having their 40th and 50th class reunions within the big reunion fest. And so please come out. I know everybody worries about it being hot, and it may be, but we're going to try to set the tents up this year along the west side to help block some sun. We've been having some, believe it or not, cool breezes in the late evening and the early mornings. And so maybe we will that particular day. And so come on out and enjoy the day with us. Another thing I want to mention, my good friend Champ Heron, who's been on the show twice, he's one of my few 2-timers that I've had on. I wanted to remind people about the breakfast that the Masonic Lodge is going to have on the morning of the 4th of July down at the Masonic Lodge. They got hit, their old building got hit down there, and that building is about the same age as the east wing of this school building. I think it was built in the 20s. And they're going to have a fundraiser to try to put a new roof back on that building due to the hailstorm that we all had. And I think their deductible is something like $6,000 or $7,000. And so they're trying to raise enough money to pay the deductible. And they're going to have a really good breakfast on the 4th of July morning. And what Champ told me is if 1,000 people would come and buy a breakfast, carry it out, eat it there, take it to the square, eat it while you're waiting on the parade to come, then they could raise enough money to do this deductible. So everybody try to help them out that morning. It would be much appreciated. They do a lot for our community as well as all the civic clubs do. With that, we'll leave it with you. We'll see you next week. We do have a show planned next week on the day of Reunion Fest. I promise you, you're going to enjoy the show. We're hoping to have a family on here that all of you know that will be really interesting. So we hope to see you then, and we might have a few extra guests or some extra podcasts due to Reunion Fest. I'll have to talk to some of my folks that are coming in from out of town and so forth. But we'll see you. Have a good week, and have